I am David Joseph, and I am very excited to pick the brain of the special guest we have in the building. You might have seen him on WWE NXT TV as Big Body Javi. I am joined by professional wrestler Randy Beidelschies. Randy, how are you today?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Very good. I'm having a good, productive day so far, and this was something I was looking forward to all week. So,
Absolutely, man.
thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was looking forward to it all week, and I appreciate you giving me the time here.
Excellent. So, I'd like to, one of the things that I think is super important, especially in the world of sports and entertainment, is kind of humanizing the performers and the pro wrestlers, because I think the job is so hard and hectic that I think sometimes it's easy for viewers and fans to almost think you guys really are superhuman and that there's not a human element to you. So I'd like to hope to humanize you as a performer by the end of this. But I'd like to ask, what's one thing that you hope people understand about yourself, Randy, that doesn't necessarily always show on screen as a wrestling performer? What's one thing you'd like the audience to know about you as an individual?
For sure. Well, obviously, as Big Body Hobby, that was, very much a fun thing to do, and it was quite literally the opposite of who I am, which is what made it fun and easy to do. But now that I'm on the indies going by Javi, just Javi,
Mm-hmm.
um, I it's definitely more elements of myself. It really is just me and who I am. I saw you mentioned the thing about humanizing, and people don't understand or realize that we are in the public eye, and we are it's easy to be like, oh, F this guy, F that guy,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I saw a comment about myself the other day. So this guy sucks in his virtual signaling BS, because
Mm-hmm.
my whole thing is that I'm I'm on the indies. I'm the core kid. I'm someone who listens to metalcore, someone who vibes with the emo kids, the kids that are picked on, the kids that are bullied, and that's very much, I wear that on my heart. And I always, it was kind of the opening promo to the show that I was on. This guy obviously likes bullies or something. So I don't know, but it's like one of those things where, like, you know. Um, I posted a video the other day, and the caption was, something that Mike Tyson said. Social media has made it so that people can say whatever they want without the fear of getting punched in the face. And
Yes.
not that I ever would. I mean, maybe I would. I don't know, depending if they said something about my wife or something. But,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
it really is true. I mean, one of the things is that, if what started this whole core kid thing, because during the end of my run in WWE, when I got back from injury, this is what I wanted to do, was this whole metalcore thing. And where I got it from was going to these concerts, and people would recognize me. It's like, hey, I didn't know you listened to this type of music. I'm like, yeah, this is what I do. This is what I love to do. So they kind of sparked, like, well, these people don't really have a representative. We don't have, there's alternative women in wrestling and in WWE. But
Mm-hmm.
at least at the time in WWE, there weren't very many alternative men. So, like, I was like, well, these are my people. Why don't I represent them? And it's more like me anyways. Um, and I definitely vibe with, the lyrical content of everything is, talking about mental health, talking about struggle, talking about emotion, things that people deal with on a day-to-day basis. I enjoyed playing Big Body Hobby for the fun of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are obviously things that you can pick up from, but I really wanted to sink my teeth into something that I felt was important.
That's awesome. That's awesome right there. And I love that because they tend to say the best characters have a piece of you in there or you dialed up
Yeah.
to a 10. So that's pretty cool that you're getting to explore that as a performer now. I'd like to kind of go back a little bit. Like, what did you grow up liking wrestling? What was your kind of your journey into wrestling as a fan and even as a professional wrestler now?
Yeah, yeah, no, I loved wrestling growing up. Like, I think on the 64 I had the no WWF No Mercy.
Love it.
And I don't think my parents, or at least my mom, didn't know what it was. They just kind of bought a N64 cartridge. I'm like, here. I'm like, okay. And even as a kid, I'd get in trouble watching wrestling. Like, don't do that stuff to your brother, and it's the Attitude Era and all this stuff. So I was like, ah. But as I grew, I loved wrestling. Wrestling was, between wrestling and football, those two were my first loves. And I knew, like, after I was finished playing professional football, that I was going to go into independent wrestling. And how I started was, I finished out arena football. I left. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go pursue college, rather professional wrestling. And I called up all the local indies where I lived in Minnesota, and I was like, "Hey, man, like, can I come, build your ring, shine your shoe, and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
shine your shoes, whatever." And I eventually got into contact with somebody who was like, "Why don't you just be a promoter with me?" So I was a promoter before even touching a ring.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, so I got to learn, a side of the business that that I wouldn't have otherwise before. And then, WWE hit me up and all that stuff. So, like I had a little taste of it, but I didn't really get to have a run on the indies before WWE. WWE scooped me up right before because I was going to be trained by Mr. Kennedy, Ken Anderson.
Oh nice.
But COVID had hit. So, like, it was kind of just a weird, weird time. But WWE scooped me up, so I got to train with Ken Anderson and Kate Diamond. They kind of helped get me prepared for my tryout there. And there, I go up to Minnesota and I work that promotion, Ironheart Professional Wrestling. Like that's where I got my start. That's where my home was. So shout out to them. That's like where I really got my start. At least getting into the business and trying to pay my dues and all that. Um, and of course, like I've just always been a fan. And I think most, with WWE now that there's like a lot of athletes who might not have been fans, but they just get recruited to
Mm-hmm.
wrestle or whatever. And I don't, you know, to be in the business, to be in the wrestling business, doesn't matter if it's WWE, Indies, AEW, TNA, you have to love wrestling.
Yeah.
Like, there's no, so like the people that don't love wrestling kind of get weeded out on their own, and it's not like a bad thing. It's just that's just what happens, it happens usually pretty quickly, because then they go into other ventures or do whatever. And there's nothing wrong with not liking wrestling or anything like that, but you can tell who watched it, who loves it, who wants to be a part of it. Um, and that was always me. I always pictured myself, WrestleMania. I always pictured myself titles and this and that, the other, and I think anybody that loved wrestling, either growing up or still loves wrestling, does picture themselves that way.
Thanks for that feedback. And yeah, that makes sense. I imagine such a grind like wrestling, you can't fake it. You can't half-ass it. Like
No,
if you
absolutely
think
not.
you can fake it to make it, it's gonna show at some point that your heart's not in it, I imagine.
Absolutely.
So when you were starting out as a wrestler, is did you have any influences? Did you have anybody that you kind of somewhat patterned your style and
Yeah.
your game after?
Yeah, no, Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels, those two are my big
Awesome.
influences. Like you could see a lot of Shawn and a lot of Jericho with a big body character in specific. I grew up a metalhead and always loved it. So and then that Attitude Era, 90s, early 2000s, like that was my era. Like that's my comfort area. I still like that's what I watch when I feel like I want to watch something good, that's what I watch. So I was heavily influenced by Jericho. You can see that a lot in my big body character, and I was very heavily influenced by Shawn. You can see that too. Those are the two big guys that shape. Others are like Triple H, CM Punk, Jeff Hardy. Right now, I'd say that like a lot of my promos, like when I was doing the big body stuff, like it was obviously very Jericho, Shawn, kind of like flamboyant or whatever. But whenever I wanted to cut anything serious, a big muse of mine, excuse me, a big muse of mine was CM Punk, or
Hmm.
is CM Punk, and I have very similar, there's a lot of similarities between me and him. I'm straight edge and,
Nice.
like how, like the punk, hardcore aesthetic. Like that's just something that's a part of me too. So, especially when I was transitioning to this other character right before I left WWE, CM Punk was obviously a major influence of mine as well. And I've had the chance to pick his brain, anytime I'd go up to Raw or SmackDown and be like, "Hey, big body," and like it was cool because he remembered, and he obviously always remembered our talks and stuff like that too. So, um, yeah, man, so many influences and so many people I got to meet and kind of pick their brain and help me mold to where I am and mold to get to the next level.
That's awesome. In general, do you have more fun being a heel or a baby face?
I love being a baby face. Being a heel is fun and all, but I'm not good at being mean to people, because I remember the first time I was a heel at a live event. And I just turned to him like, "You're fat, ugly, and stupid." And I walked off. I'm like, "Man, that wasn't very nice. I hate that. I hate this so much." Now, like when I get to be clever, like it's fun when, I get to be clever and, kind of be a jackass a little bit. Like that's fun because people usually play back. But I don't like being mean. I think being, especially this iteration of my character right now of my gimmick of who I am, being myself is just very genuine. And anybody that doesn't vibe with it, can F off. Everybody has their opinions and all that, and like I said, if you, not you, but the general you, vibes with people who like to be bullies, then that's your thing, man. But me, like I've always wanted to be the kid that standing up for bullies and stuff like that, or stand up against bullies rather. Um, that's why I was, it's funny because I like Shawn and Jericho, and they were very both cocky heels, but then Punk was always the guy getting bullied, and that always resonated with me and stuff like that. So um, I you know I definitely prefer being a babyface just because it feels more natural. I always feel like I like to fight for what's good and fight for what's right. It's more genuine to myself.
Yeah, that's fascinating because I feel like the wrestlers that I've gotten to speak to, they tend to lean heel because of course it's probably easier to get over. Like you just cuss people out, say rude things. So
Yes.
there's you could gravitate that more. But I feel like it can be hard sometimes with the sometimes cynical fan base to be that good guy. But I think
Yeah.
it's awesome that you like to lean into that direction. And I think the more listen, I'm one of those people that I like the cookie cutter good guys. I think
Mhm.
it could be a lost art once in a while, and I think
Yeah.
we need more. We need more guys that fight for justice and good.
Right. And I think like the biggest thing too, man, is like, I I'm sure like people get pissed off at whatever you say, whether it's good or bad or indifferent or
Hmm.
whatever. And you know, we call them smart fans or
Yeah.
whatever, and you know, it's great. Cheer for what you want to cheer for. It's fine and all that.
Hmm.
But to be honest, like when I see or hear comments of like, like just that, just anybody that's listening that's a smart fan knows like we all kind of point and laugh at that sort of thing because it's like, at the end of the day, we are people outside of wrestling. And for me, like I take things personally in a positive way. Like I put my heart and my soul and my body into my character and I try to make it as much of it as me as possible. And I'm not trying to be, I don't want to be the next John Cena. I want to be the next hobby,
Hmm.
and I want to fight for good, but I want to fight for people that, resonate towards me, people that listen to my type of music or don't, or feel like they're bullied all the time. People that, it resonates with me, people who feel
Hmm.
like they're looked upon differently because they look different and they act. I remember when I came back from my injury and I had like a dark match, um, I had a completely different look and everything, and I got called, a lot of homophobic slurs, I got
Oh
called
wow.
a lot of
Wow.
slurs, not even homophobic, not just homophobic, but like just slurs in general. And I'm like, my favorite thing is when I hear people like, oh, they just, reheating somebody else's nachos or you're just doing the same thing somebody else does. So when somebody does something different, then it's met with, you're this or you're that, and
Hmm.
like. And they hadn't even seen, like I just returned. They hadn't even seen any match because it was a dark match. So they hadn't even seen anything that I did. Which, in all honesty, man, like it kind of proves my point,
Yeah.
as someone that wants to stick up for people who don't fit in, for people who like might dress a little differently, and um, I think that's the biggest thing is that people hide behind social media, people behind fake profiles or whatever. And I'm real, man. Like, if you come up to me and you talk to me like, man, I'll be the nicest guy. I have no ego about myself.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people in the business that do, and that's okay. But like I don't. Um, and I think I mean, I just think that people would be a lot more happy if they just shut up and watched and just enjoyed
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
Just shut up and
yeah.
watch, man. Like I like if you don't like me, then just turn the channel off. That's fine. I don't care.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I know I'm very good at what I do. And that's all, I don't that's it. I'm very good at what I do. But like, if you don't like it, turn the channel, man. I don't, you don't need to, like you know, that's a great thing about social media, and that's the worst thing about social media is you can say whatever you want, and you can also say whatever you want. So, at the end of the day, man, I'm just being myself.
Hmm.
If you catch me in the store, I will give you the biggest embrace. I'll make sure, you feel like you're the only person in the room. That's a person that I want to be. Um, and if people have, boo to say about it, then boo me. All right, whatever, It's just,
I love that because I'm a big advocate as a fan and a guy who's really into the industry and learning about it. I am such an advocate for that. And don't get me wrong, even myself, I can catch myself getting critical, but I make sure to never get critical to the point where it's ruining my fun. And I think we're in a
exactly.
time on social media, people are like hypercritical to the point where it's like, do you even enjoy the art of professional wrestling? If you're that upset at everything, I mean, you should turn it off, like you
Yeah,
said.
100%, 100%. If you don't
Yeah,
like
you
it, then
gotta
just
have
just
fun.
turn
You
it
gotta
off.
have fun with whether you like it or hate it. You gotta have fun. Pro wrestling's fun, man, and
Yeah,
I'm an
absolutely.
advocate of that. Um, I'm curious, but what would you say are some of the most important, like behind the scenes lessons you may have learned while you were in the WWE system? What are some like
Sure.
tried and true lessons that you found valuable to your career?
I could pick a hand. I could. I have so many, but like, uh, one thing I learned is that sometimes, sometimes it doesn't matter how hard you work. It's just time and place and opportunity. Um,
Yeah.
I'll be quite frank. I was there for 4 years. You're not there for 4 years if you're not good. Like,
Yeah.
I'll see people tweet things on the internet or whatever, but like at the end of the day, like I got there and I was there for 4 years. It wasn't like I was there for a year and got kicked out. I was there
Hmm.
for a good amount of my time there. And sometimes you're just chosen and sometimes you're not. And it's not a bad thing. It's not, me speaking ill of anything. It doesn't matter how good you are sometimes. It doesn't. And it doesn't mean you should stop. It doesn't mean you should quit. And sometimes it just means the answer is not right now. Um, One of the biggest things, I get bitter. I got bitter at some
Hmm.
points while I was there because, John Cena was at one of our, we have these things called PC Lives where just like, we do matches in the performance center just for shows or whatever. And it was just, a bunch of my friends, some were on the main roster, some were not, or whatever. But like we had a show and I wrestled somebody and I asked, I went up to John, and he gave me the feedback of like, like you were obviously the most experienced, your character, you know what you're doing, you had the best match of the night, like, everything, like I knew exactly what you were and who you were
Hmm.
when you came out and you were the match of the night and after he went away, somebody had texted me, hey, John Cena's still talking about you.
Wow.
And it was one of those things where I'm like, it's frustrating because I'm like, okay, well, so if somebody's talking about me, somebody of the caliber of John Cena, what's, another advocate of mine who was Booker T, like he's always on my side. He's always had my back. And he's always, like he propped me up like, man, you're a star. You just gotta keep going or whatever, like it's one of those things when you have names like John Cena and Booker T and people who like have weight behind their name, at the time when I was, nothing, like tell him, man, this guy's great. What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? And the lesson that I take from that is sometimes it's just not your time yet. Sometimes you're not. Sometimes it doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter how good you are. If you're not what anybody. If you're not the thing at the time and place, then it's just not for you right then and there. And that's not a dig at That's not a dig at anything or anybody. Because they have their shows that they got to run. Um, the way that they see fit, like the best way it was described to me by somebody is like if you're in a movie, you're trying to fit a movie role for somebody, and if your role is not what they want in that movie, then it's just you're just not in that movie, you know what I mean? So it's not a bad thing whatsoever. It's just time and place. And that's something I want to make very, very clear. It's just time and place, and it's not always a no, it's just a not right now.
Yeah, and that's very well said because we see so many performers that their first go round maybe they don't even last 4 years, but they come back and have a solid career, and we see people that even start off on the main roster, they don't maybe pan out, and then they come back. So I definitely think that could even apply to wrestling and life. Like
Yeah,
sometimes it's a not right now, and that doesn't mean that you're not good at what you do. It's just timing has a way of handling itself, and you got to keep grinding. um
exactly.
Speaking of the grind, you as a longtime wrestler and a wrestling fan, you've heard it all. Oh, that fake stuff. Oh, do they really get hurt? Oh, it's scripted. Can you take us behind the scenes to the real grind that it takes in professional wrestling, period, and even in the NXT system? To can you talk about like the difficulty of the craft and
Absolutely.
the pain that you guys endure?
I mean, I certainly, it's certainly nobody could tell me it's fake after, last year I broke my foot catching somebody on a dive and,
Oh,
shattered my foot, I had to have two surgeries on it. We all saw that commercial, with Rey Mysterio. I had surgery 5 times on my left knee,
yeah,
it's like it's burned into my memory. But it's true. I mean, like after I broke my foot, I felt more like a real wrestler than I did before. Because it's not, I said earlier, you have to love it if you want to keep grinding at it, keep doing it, because the grind, it sucks. It really does suck. Especially if you don't love it. It doesn't suck so much if you love it, but it sucks if you don't. And in particular with the NXT system, we were in there training every day. I was in the, Terry Taylor's class, which was the finishing, you're out of, like you're out of training class. Um, and that's where you kind of like absorb and learn a lot of like the more emotional state of wrestling, I think. But like like for however long, just bumping every day,
yeah.
lifting every day, and um I'm still, I'm still wrestling, so I'm still lifting every day, but I don't bump every day like I did.
Hmm.
And it feels better in my body for sure. Not bumping every day, but at the same time, there's a reason that we bump every day. You want to stay ready, stay used to it. You know what I mean? You have to keep your body used to it. I always laugh whenever I see people are like, it's fake or this. I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, take one bump because your first one's gonna suck. You're gonna feel like you want to throw up.
Oof.
Yeah, no, it's not fun. Like it's fine once you get used to it, but it's still, every bump you take, if you think of your life as like a video game meter, and every bump you take just goes, 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 goes until you take your last bump. You're like, wow, I can't do that anymore. Um, so aside from the grind, like, cause like, I get banged up, like, being on the road, with NXT, every weekend, every other weekend, however it was. I wanted to be on everything. I wanted to be on absolutely everything. Whenever I'd go up to Raw for a main event, I'd come back the next day and I would do an NXT taping or Level Up or whatever it was. And you'd get sick but you'd have to keep going. And like that's just what it is. If you want it, you have to get after it and you have to go after it. I had a match with Joe Gacy, who's one of my best friends. And I had a match with Bronson Reed the night before in main event. It was in Portland or whatever, so I had to fly all the way back from Portland all the way from Orlando, and I was
Oof.
already sick. And I was like, okay, all right, I can get through the next day if I don't have anything tomorrow. I can sleep in, whatever. Of course, I get the text. I'm like, ugh. And I'm throwing up Tuesday. I told like,
Oh,
and I was like, Joe, and I hear my music and my legs go like gel. I'm like, oh boy, this is. And then I come back like, oh, that was one of your better matches in recent time. I'm like, really? Because I felt like I sucked because wind got knocked out of me. So like, it just goes to show you that you have to really want it. You have to really love it. Because at the end of the day, I wouldn't have wanted to call and be like, hey, I can't do it. No,
hmm.
I wouldn't have wanted to do that. You'd have to pull me out to do that. You know what I mean? So, um, it's a grind for sure, and it sucks, but you have to want it. And if you don't want it, you get taken out pretty quickly.
So if fans are, let's say a newer fans just learning about your work, are there some matches that you would point out to them that like, okay, this was one of my favorites, or this is a match that I really feel like we had good chemistry. I had great chemistry with my opponents. Are there favorite matches that come to mind?
Absolutely. As far as NXT goes, and that's to get a taste of what I used to do. I had a match with Axiom. I had a feud with him that was really fun. That's kind of where I started the whole BBC thing and stuff like that. When I got, I that was it was funny because that was a skit that I wrote, or the backstage. I wrote that, and I was very proud because I was like, oh, I get to
Ah,
put this
that's
on national
awesome.
television. That's awesome because um. Big Body Javi was kind of like, like I said, Jericho kind of just a little bit funny or whatever. And, it doesn't always go the way we want it to. But at the time when I was doing it, it was really fun because, like, I pitched doing, like, I don't know if you remember back in like 2010, 11, DX used to do these Christmas commercials, right?
Yeah,
The
I
new
remember
DX
that.
WWE DVD and the new DX blanket, the new DX beanie, whatever. So that's where I got the idea from. I'm like, okay, well, what can I say that's suggestive? Because NXT is kind of full of young people that like to, like push boundaries, push the envelope. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, like BBC. Well, I was just whatever I could think of. And I was like, BBC, that's awesome because like there's obviously a double entendre there. Um, and so yeah, I think the original idea I had BBW in it. Obviously that got nixed, but I got to go with BBC, which is great. I forget what else I had originally what I had originally done, but my match that was kind of leading up to my match with Axiom. I did like a kind of like a Jericho 1001 holds. I had a list similar to that, the big body files. Some of the more newer stuff that I had a match with um I just Javon Evans on a level up. When I was on Evolve, I had a match with uh Luca and Oro Mensa, and Riley Osborne, all telling this really cool story because I was coming back as Big Body Javi, but I was going through this like almost born again Christian recovering alcoholic storyline where I was getting to the emo metalcore Javi, where I just kept losing. I'm like, maybe I'm not Big Body anymore. Maybe I would never really was. Maybe that was just a facade. And I like telling stories like that because people who are obviously people that are bullied, people that are left out, but also people who might feel like everybody feels like they have a past of some sort, or um, the person you were isn't the person you are now, and you need to focus on the person that you are now. That was something that I thought was a cool story to tell, like something that a lot of people can relate to, whether they're an addict or maybe they're not happy where they're at in life. Maybe that they think that they need to become a better person, whatever it is. I don't know your story, uh, but what I can know is I know the struggle, because everybody deals with it at some point in their life. And I think that was such a meaningful story to tell. And then the matches that I had were good too. So I enjoyed those matches. Those would be some of the newer ones. On the independent scene, um, excuse me, the last few matches that I've had a lot of fun. I wrestled Colby Carino in June, and that was a fun match. And shout out to him. I know he just had a neck injury and all that. So everybody go pray for him, think about him, support him and his family, please. Colby Carino. Another match I had was at Reality of Wrestling with Savage King. That was a lot of fun. And to be honest, I'm having a lot of fun on the Indies wrestling because I get to find my own voice without someone telling me who I should be or what I should be And I feel like it's more genuine because that's the thing about WWE, and it's not a bad thing, but it is a system, and they're watching everything that you do, they're watching, and it's good. That's at the end of the day, like it's a job, and you have to take it serious and all that. And if one person thinks that you should be doing something, then it's your job. You do it, right?
Yeah.
With creative freedom, and that's a thing too, because if you don't have creative freedom to show things, they might not get it. And it's not anybody's fault or anything like that. There's nothing like that. It's just, if you don't get to show it, nobody gets to see what it looks like. And I feel like the stuff that I'm doing now, people are like, damn, this guy, like this is a whole different thing, and he's working differently. And I've had people from WWE reach out and say, man, Dan, you're killing it, you're doing great, and all that, and you're like, don't stop, you're really good, whatever the case may be. Um, so on the matches that I've had here on the indies, I've just really had a chance to like do stuff that I would do, wrestle how I
Yeah.
would, and be more genuine to myself. And when you're more genuine, people are like, oh, why didn't you get a chance to do that here? And like, well, because, it just wasn't the agenda right now, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So, whether it's WWE seeing it and being like, oh, we need to give that another chance, or, AEW being like, I think that guy fits in there, TNA or MLW or NWA, whatever, New Japan, Noah, wherever it is. Um, I think now is a very good time for all of these companies because I'm a free agent and, anybody can pick me up. And I think it's a good time
Yeah.
for them because of that reason.
Yeah, seriously, the wrestling landscape is super healthy, and it's just really cool to see as a fan how many options there are. But I'd like you to talk a little bit more about. I think you hit on something that doesn't always get talked about. Like sometimes when people are no longer with WWE, people think it's the end of the world, but I think some professional wrestlers find value in being able to wrestle on their own schedule on the independents, being
Yeah.
able to kind of pick and choose the bookings that work for them, be having that creative freedom. Can you talk a little bit more about that and like what goes in on the independent scene? Like obviously it's not as much of a micromanaged system that WWE can be so far
Mhm.
sometimes. So what goes into like your matches? Like do you guys have a producer or is it like wrestlers just kind of call it in the ring fully or what goes
I
into that?
mean, it really all depends. Like in WWE, it's very micromanaged, obviously. I wouldn't
Yeah.
even say micromanaged, just very managed.
Manage, yeah.
Yeah. But on the indies, I mean, it really depends where you go. If it's a TV company, yeah, excuse me, you might have um some sort of assignment to go towards or something, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like up to the workers, to kind of put the match together. And I have the bless. I realize that I'm in a very blessed position to have had WWE under my belt because I've learned a lot, and a lot of times people ask me what should we do, and it's great and it makes me feel good, but also like I at the end of the day I know that I'm good at what I do. And so when somebody comes to me and asks, what if we do this? What do we do? It's a very collaborative
Hmm.
experience. Um, but at the end of the day, oh, we should do this because this makes sense. We're like, oh yes, whatever it is. To be honest, I didn't mind the schedule at WWE. To be honest, the thing that I would change when I was there, NXT, and it doesn't apply to everybody. It applies to people who might be, good enough to do this. I wanted to be on the road every day of the week.
Hmm.
Instead, we'd have classes, and the classes are good. The classes are important for people to have. But I feel like I'm one of those people that needs to go out and do it to learn.
Yeah.
Do it, watch, do it, watch, do it, watch, and then I kind of learn that's kind of how, I would have much preferred, and I know that's something that most like I think I think 99% of the coaches at NXT would probably agree. It's just a matter of being able to do it or whatever, like because there's a lot, being on the promoting side of wrestling, having had been on it, I realize that there's a lot of red tape you have to go through. There's a lot of things you have to do. It's not as easy as like, let's have a show.
Hmm.
It's not as easy as that. And they're a multi-million-dollar company, so I can imagine there are way more pieces than
Yeah.
any indie company that would have to deal with that, right? So, it's not even it's not even like they should be doing it. It's like it's probably that they can't, or it's just a very difficult thing
Hmm.
to do. Um, but I'm someone that loves the grind, loves to be on the road wrestling every day, whatever it is. Um, and so I at what during my time in WWE, I felt like I was pretty busy. I'd ask to be on every live event, whatever shows, just put me on it and let me just go to town, go to work. And I feel like that's how I feel now on the indies. I just want to be anywhere and everywhere. And that's really it. Like I said, you have to love this. And if you
Yeah.
don't love it, then you're not gonna go very far. At least you're not gonna, or at the very least, you might not reach where you think you should.
Completely fair. Do you have any bucket list or dream opponents in general, whether it's MLW, TNA, WWE, or even the independents?
For sure. Well, I have two in mind that are currently, like, and they're WWE guys, but I've always wanted to work Matt Cardona and Nick Nemeth.
Mm,
Those two come to mind. I think I would have a killer match with both of those people. Both of those men are just great. Um, as far as independent talent that I've kind of been scoping out and keep my eyes on, Effie is one of them. Effie's been kind to me, just coming out of WWE and stuff like that, and we've chatted here and there. So um, in AEW, there's just a handful. There's just not a handful. There's a basket
hmm
full of of talent over at AEW. So I would say all of them. I have a bunch of friends over there.
hmm
GYV, Mason Mansoor. A handful of friends over there and stuff like that. So um, you know, everywhere and anywhere. I just want to be everywhere and anywhere. MLW, Dijak, and Matt Riddle,
I love
Cruel.
Dijak. I interviewed Dijak before. Great guy.
Dijak is a good brother.
Love him.
Yeah, no, he helped me out a lot just chatting with him and stuff like that. Cruel is another one over at MLW. TNA, I'd love to obviously work the Hardy Boys. I'd love to work. Well, I was gonna say Sammy Callahan, but he just retired.
Hmm
So, but I would have loved to have worked him. I just missed it just by a little bit.
Yeah.
So I just any everywhere and anywhere, you know what I mean? I'm ready for the challenge. That's the thing I like. I think a lot of people just kind of slow down from WWE to the Indies, but I just want to be like someone that I do look to for a lot of that inspiration is Matt Cardona. You see
Yep.
what he does with his social media. You see what he does. Just being everywhere and anywhere. I mean, obviously, he has his own businesses and stuff like that, and he's so up on social media. Like I don't know how he does it, but he's just completely revamped himself, and I just love it.
Yeah, absolutely. He is definitely like the standard when it comes to the wrestlers marketing
Absolutely.
their own brand on the internet. He really did
Yes.
kind of start that vibe. It's cool to see what he's evolved
He'd make
into.
a lot of money doing it, teaching a class, but
Seriously,
but I'm sure he's making a lot of money
doing
with
what
his
he's doing.
doing what
Yeah.
he's doing now. So but yeah, no man, I think if he ran a class, dude, that would be crazy because yeah, he is the standard.
Yeah. Yeah, and those were all great dream opponents, by the way. I also noticed that you've got wear a hat in real estate. Can you talk about that? Where did that come in?
It's a side thing, man. Like I realize that wrestling's not going to be, around for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I'd like to wrestle for the next 20, 30 years of my life. But on the back end of that, like, well, like having a real, I got my real estate license and I just figure, like it's one of those things where like when I was in WWE, I'd be trying to get my hand in so many different things, which
hmm
I realize that wrestling's not going to be around for the next
Yeah.
20, like after 20, 30 years when I'm done wrestling, I want to have something there. And an inspiration of mine is Jericho, who has his hand in, wrestling and music and writing books and acting, and that's kind of like the same trajectory that I would like, like in my own way, obviously. And real estate's just kind of a side thing. I'm like, that's it took me about a month to get my license. It's one of those things where I
Nice.
have my hand, in Twitch streaming and in wrestling and this and that. I just want to make sure, I just have something in my back pocket, and it's like I said, it's a side business too. So, it's one of those things where like, you know, um, whether I go back to WWE, get signed to AEW, I still got a license, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just still have qualifications anywhere I go.
Awesome. I'd like to end with this, and I really appreciate your time. I think that all your information and being able to pick your brain has been super informative, and I think it'll add a lot of value to the audience seeing this. When fans look back from now, what would you want to be your legacy, or what would you want to be remembered for in wrestling or outside of wrestling, even, but particular in wrestling?
I mean, in wrestling, it's such a cliche that everyone wants to be the best in the world. And, obviously I would love to be considered that. And I'd love to work towards that. Um, But at the end of the day, I'm working towards having my name being remembered as someone who just didn't give up and got, you know, who climbed the mountain. He kept getting pushed off the mountain, but wouldn't stop until he climbed to the top of the mountain. Um, you know, like I said, nothing in life is ever fair. Sometimes you're just not picked. But I'm gonna keep working until you have no choice but to pick me. Um, and that's what I'd want to be remembered for. Obviously, on the personal side, I'd love for people to remember me as a good husband, a good son, as a good individual, stands up for the right things and does the right things when he can, and someone that's always, I want to be selfless. Like that's the biggest thing. In a business like wrestling, where you're surrounded by, well, I mean, where you almost kind of are peer pressured to be selfish. Like I just want to be. It's hard to be selfless, and that's, on a personal side, I want to be
Hmm.
selfless.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Randy, for your time. Can you plug in any of your handles and let the people know where to find you in your work?
Absolutely. Yes. So all my socials, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Twitch are Core Kid Javi, CoreKidJavi. I also have a music that's my wrestling theme, released under the band Shattered by Hope. You can find that on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, anywhere that you listen to music. And I will be in the next month. I don't know when this is interview will be released, but the next month, I will be, let me look at my handy dandy thing here. The next few weeks, I'll be at 3LW for the Red Rose Rumble in Pennsylvania on the 6th. On the 13th, I will be at Reality of Wrestling in Houston. On the 18th, I'll be in New Mexico for NWA Duke City Championship Wrestling. And on Saturday, the 20th, I will be at Pro Wrestling Magic in Ridgefield Park, New Jersey. Those are my next few dates coming up.
Great stuff. Booked and busy.
Booked and busy,
Always
man.
always grinding, and we appreciate you.